U.S. government attempting to ban TikTok.
Yes, I've heard about this.
Do you know what TikTok is?
I do. I
Well,
do actually.
you're on TikTok, right?
Yeah, I do have a page on there. I kind of go on and create my little stuff for that. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that it's even gotten this far.
Yeah. So today is March 14th. The 13th or
Is
14th?
it?
I wouldn't
I
know.
think it's the 13th.
No, yeah, I think it's 13th. So they voted on this
Yeah.
bill today. They vote on the bill to ban TikTok, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanna kind of break down the bill so people can understand like what they're actually banning, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in layman's terms, it's pretty much saying, hey, they're voting in the House of Representatives, I believe, or maybe even the Congress, I forget which one, to decide if the U.S. should ban TikTok. First off, what's your thought on banning TikTok before I get into the detail?
I don't think they should ban it.
Why not?
That's it. Because there's a lot of information that people have received through that app that you would have never discovered elsewhere. And because it's so open and free source of media and information, like those things people want to suppress and condense because I want to say there's a lot of history that I discovered reading it, and one of them was like this place Lake Lanier in Georgia that used to be a like a thriving black community that they kind of bulldozed over and turned into a lake, and there's a city that sits at the bottom of it. Like stuff like that I would have never like discovered if I didn't just randomly come across it on that app. So there's a lot of random bits of knowledge and little gems that like it's just like a hive mind or a collective web of people all putting their ideas together, and you just happen to come across something one day and like, oh wow, this is really interesting. Like where did this come from? Or that or this, that, and third. It's a lot of inspirational stuff on there. And because
Yeah,
it's not controlled by America, I feel like it's not as censored compared to other American apps.
yeah. So before I give my opinion about, let me give you the details as best I can, broken down in a way that we can all understand. So when the legislation came out and the legislation that came to the table to ban TikTok, it's not technically banning the app. The What they're banning is saying that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, and currently, based on the state of affairs, China is what you would call a U.S. adversary, meaning like we ain't getting along with China. Russia is a U.S. adversary, right?
That's funny though.
Uh,
That's so funny.
right. So what the ban is actually saying is that we're banning the App Store's ability to offer U.S. adversary apps to the U.S. demographic. Meaning that, say, if you had an app and you were China and I own the App Store, the government is saying, like, hey, say I'm Apple, hey, you can't put China's app in your App Store because it's owned by China. So it's not technically banning TikTok, it's banning the ability for U.S. adversaries to have apps in their app store, right? So
Right.
what the workaround is if China, no, I'll tell you that back. If TikTok, who is owned by a company in China called ByteDance, if TikTok sells a majority of their shares of their stocks or their company to a non-adversary owner or the U.S., then it could be allowed in the App Store and it wouldn't be banned. But then we go into, well, why is that a problem? If China owns TikTok, like what's the problem there? So the problem is that China, China is not like America in the sense of capitalism. So a company in America, i.e., Apple, the U.S. government doesn't have control over who um, doesn't have control over what Apple does in the sense of they can't call Apple and say, "Hey, Apple, give me all your data. I want to see all the people who have your phones. I want to see all the people who do this, all the people that do that." They may do it in some back room that is not legal, but technically, the U.S. government doesn't have that right to have Apple's data that they've collected through their people that buy their products. But in China, because it's a communist country, every company in China is connected to the government. So every user on TikTok, their information goes to the government. So all of your liking habits, scrolling habits, things you look at, all that stuff right there goes to the government in China, and they can manipulate the algorithm to make certain regions, i.e., the U.S., see certain stuff. So the issue comes in not just because that TikTok is owned by China, but because TikTok is owned by China and China is communist, and pretty much the government controls or has full access to all information on TikTok because it's owned by China. If that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because a year ago they were going to do the same thing and ban it. They said the workaround is they have to relinquish all of the data controls to a company that's on U.S. soil, and there's a Texas company. I don't remember the name of it, but all of the TikTok data furnishing for the U.S. goes through a U.S. company that's managed in Texas.
Right.
So that's one thing that throws me off. And the other thing is China is our biggest import export country. Yet those things, when it comes to that element, um, isn't as scrutinized in comparison to this. So if they don't actually have all of the data from us because it's managed here, it really sounds to me that they want to be able to receive some of the monetary revenue from TikTok because right now there's no other app that's creating as much revenue the way TikTok is.
Who do you mean want to receive the revenue from TikTok?
The U.S. government,
Oh, I don't agree with that. I think that
because
I think that YouTube has a similar ability in shorts to where they can take a little bit of that revenue that TikTok generates because they got shorts. Instagram has shorts. Facebook has shorts. So I don't think it's like I don't think it's the government wants revenue from China or from TikTok because the government can print money. So I think that the revenue they get is not really going to move the needle. And what I think is personally is that like when it comes to security and it comes to population control, they don't want an outside body to control the population. So as we understand with social media is addictive. It controls people. And these
mm-hmm,
things called the
attention,
algorithm, yes.
right,
So one thing about TikTok, it's different in different countries. In China, it's a different TikTok and it's called something different. It's like Douyin or something like that in China. But in China, the TikTok is different than America. And these are some of the differences. In China, the difference is you can only be on TikTok and and I may be a little bit off of like with the numbers, maybe like 40 minutes a day, maybe a couple out, but I mean, it's a limit to how long you can be on TikTok for every Chinese citizen. That's one. For two, the the things that you see on your feed are typically educational or cinematic to where it may be the government who allows like certain movie companies to pop up on your feed or is giving you educational clips and stuff like that. The the algorithm in the US is more so influencer based. When you go to a US
right.
TikTok, it's going to be a lot more influencers, a lot more doom um, doom content than you would get in China. So they understand that they need to control their population and not allow them to have um, social media all day. And then on top of that, they control the content as opposed to America, who has TikTok available to them 24 hours a day. And the and majority of the content is going to be influencer based or doom based.
Got you. Okay, and I guess my other point is, I mean, if they really wanted to abide by that, they could sell it. They could just have partner up with a the person who runs TikTok. He's from Singapore, so if he wanted to take majority of it and get it under whatever the other name of the country that's based in China, he could do that. I mean, there's things around it, but I get your point as far as population restricting and monitoring who is in control of the population through the attention based apps because it's a short form content app, which those quick hits of dopamine get you addicted really quick.
Right. And lastly about that, so pretty much the ban is saying like, hey, China, you don't have freedom of speech in the U.S. You can't have a company in China and allow it to infiltrate the U.S. and promote or put on it like whatever you want. But we do have free speech in the U.S. So why doesn't China have free speech in the U.S. and most U.S. companies and U.S. people have free speech? So this is another kind of like tricky part of understanding why it's being banned and in the bill and all that stuff is that
Right,
when
right,
you really break down, U.S. citizens have free speech based on the First Amendment, who give which provides free speech to everyone, right? But outside entities don't have that same free speech. So a company
because
in
they're not
China
citizens, quote unquote.
doesn't have the same free speech as say Facebook or really the only
Mm,
the only real free speech platform I would say out right now is Twitter because it's not compromised by the government. But Chinese companies don't have that right to come to America and shovel in front of us whatever they want to shovel in front of us. So that's part of the that's part of the legislation is kind of breaking down that because they're a Chinese owned company, y'all don't have the right to come here and infiltrate America's people and what you guys is doom and garbage or whatever it is that TikTok may be pushing to Americans a majority of the time. So if they sold that company to an American based corporation or person or whoever, that would bypass the whole China owning it. And now they would have full access to operate TikTok however they want.
all right, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I thought that was a very interesting topic. And I'll say this for me personally, my kids do not have TikTok, and I'll take that back. My kids don't have permission to have TikTok on their own. I got a 14-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son. My 14-year-old can have it, but only under the guise of us being around when she uses
Right.
it. And
Okay. I
it
mean
may sound a
that makes
little bit
sense.
extreme, but it is only for TikTok. It's because you just don't know what is being what data is being taken from the users. So we monitor TikTok a little bit more than the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Twitters. But honestly, I mean, it's all getting us in some kind of
Yeah.
way.
I mean, at
Yeah.
some point, it's all getting the attention. You know, that's what it's
Right.
going for. So that part's working.